Hi,
Hello.
Joshua, Sal. In this podcast, we're going to go back to my favorite subject, which is meat, the subject of meat and the ethics, the problems. Well, it is a problem, really, in a way, um, between people who have a very firm belief system that we should be vegan or we should be vegetarian, and those who propose that we're really supposed to be eating meat, although we can tolerate some vegetables. So, as usual, I'll let you start.
For me, I've tried lots of different lifestyle diets, being a vegetarian and a vegan, and I've now settled on the fact that I need meat in my diet, and it's got to be ethically sourced meat. I got a little job in a butcher once, and that was very enlightening. The difference in the taste of an animal that has had a good life versus an animal that's had a mass-produced and unpleasant existence. You can really taste the difference, and I want to be eating good quality meat so that I get all those nutrients and none of that trauma. That's been fundamental for me. That's been the biggest change. I can taste it. I know what it's about and it squares it off for me. For me, my ideal supermarket is a field, and I've got a crossbow or a gun, and I go and pick the animal that I want to, eat and kill it in situ. That is where I'm aiming at. That's what I would like to do. I think that sometimes consumers are so devoid from meat. They like it all pre-packaged, and seeing the organs or bones is too much. I'm like, well, that's their choice. But for me, I want to be involved in the whole process and respect that animal. I see other animals in the animal kingdom that enjoy meat as I do, and they whales can be a little bit cruel to the seals that they go for and they want to eat, as well as I've seen how cats kind of tease and are cruel to the prey that they consume. I don't want to be involved in that. I want it to be an ethical, clean kill, respecting the animal, eat nose to tail, make the most of it, get the bones, use every part of it. It's a respect for the animal opposed to abuse, which is what the current system is about.
So that's a wrap. We're finished now.
My perspective.
So, this is a very valid and important issue that nobody wants to eat an animal that's been suffering. For one thing, when animals are suffered, they're full of adrenaline, and their meat is a horrible quality. It really looks, and it's sticky. It's like the adrenaline has changed the structure of the meat. So nobody wants that. Nobody wants an animal that's suffering. The best meat to eat is one of a healthy, happy animal. So purely from a very practical perspective, um, we're totally in agreement with anyone who says, "Oh, I don't want to eat the meat of a suffering animal." Hey, neither do we. You need your head examined. However, in this day and age, unfortunately, abattoirs do have to get the animals a day or two beforehand. The animal is taken away from the herd, so they're already stressed out. Then they go to a place where they can smell, they know what's going to happen, they're stuck, they're trapped. So it's not a good way.
And let's also consider, because of this, mass production of animals, the antibiotics that are used, the feeds, the corners that are cut. I mean, I'm always paying a premium for the meat because I know it's had a better life, and I know that the meat is going to be top quality. It's going to be good for me. Whereas I think some consumers turn a blind eye to this, or there's a blissful ignorance. It's a shame that people aren't more aware of the cruelty that is endured by a lot of animals, and the shortcuts that are made when they could be, it could be handled in a much better manner.
So the subject here is really people who enjoy eating meat versus people who enjoy eating vegetables. I'm not quite sure if that's quite the right way to describe it, really, because for me, eating meat is a necessity. And a vegan, a vegetarian might say the same thing. Well, it's a necessity for me to just eat this. But I'd like to point out that 150 years ago, there were no vegans. There were no vegetarians. Not unless you were desperate because there was no meat around. I mean, if there's no meat around, then you eat what you can. And purely from a historical perspective, we have acquired the genetics to be able to create fructose. Now, fructose, which can be found in fruit, and in these days it can be found in any American restaurant. Fructose is something that the body creates to hibernate with. So when autumn comes, the bear will eat fruits, will eat sweet stuff. Cows will have salt. They want to put as much weight on as they can before winter comes. And so this is a genetic trait, and we've picked that up. We didn't used to have it, but we picked that up as a result of various cataclysms throughout millions of years, whereby there's been a lot of hunger, and those who managed to create stores of fat in their body survived, and those who didn't died. So it's become part of what we've got. However, in this day and age, and bear in mind that fructose, as in fruits or honey, will only be at certain times of the year. But now fructose is everywhere, and the fruits which contain fructose to a very high degree, they have been genetically modified over the last few hundred years to increase the sugar content to such an extent. I mean, people think banana is really good for you. Well, maybe once in a while they say, oh, banana is really good because of the potassium, but you don't really need potassium. Potassium's in pretty much everything. But banana is really good for you. But there's a difference between having one banana once a week and having 2 or 3 bananas a day. And you're talking one banana, you're talking a date, you're talking a fig. There's a lot of foods which are very high glycemic, very high in the fructose, and that gets turned directly to fat in the body. So the vegetarians, the fruitarians, they would say, this is what you should eat. But it is fraught with long-term problems unless you're very, very disciplined and careful in your diet, which the average person is not. I certainly wasn't when I was a young lad and I was a vegan, nor was I when I was a vegetarian. So we need to appreciate that food needs to be understood. Certainly in this day and age, food needs to be understood, because we don't trust our guts anymore. We rely on other people telling us what to eat. We don't know what to eat. The government tells us what to eat. The pharmaceutical and co tell us what to eat. The medical association that tells us what to eat. The people who sell all the factory produce, they advertise galore to tell us what to eat. They go to the governments and they lobby to tell us what to eat, basically eat what they're creating. And from a young age, we have parents who have been indoctrinated by all this, what we should eat. And so we eat what we're told to eat, even though we don't like it. I mean, I was 5 years old, and my grandmother put a plate of beans in front of me. I said, oh, I don't want to eat that. She said, okay, took it away. Lunchtime, I was really hungry. Same bag, the same plate of beans was there. I'm not eating that. By dinner time, I thought they tasted great. So, but it wasn't what I wanted to eat. It's just that I was so hungry, I would eat whatever. So my taste buds got changed, and the same applies to all of us. So we have been socialized into eating foods which 150 years ago they would think we were mad. People were starving to find enough meat, because you can only eat meat certain times of the year. Most of the land belonged to certain people, so unless you went out in poaching or you paid a lot of money, unless you were a farmer and you had your own cattle, meat, you had to pay for it, and not everyone could afford it, but people were desperate to eat meat. And people have been desperate to eat meat forever. 2,000 years ago, the Egyptians, I don't know about them, but they used to, their staple was, it was a wheat and rye, I think, or wheat and buckwheat. That was their staple diet. When you look at the mummies, they've looked at them, and they all died young, by the 40s, 50s. They had atherosclerosis, heart problems. You cannot survive on that sort of diet. Well, you can, clearly, but long term, it's not good. We need meat because we need the protein that comes from it, we need the fat. Our bodies, they require 9 essential amino acids. There's only a few seeds that contain those, like quinoa, buckwheat. There's a couple of others, but or soya. But these things, they don't exist in profusion. They don't exist all over the world. You couldn't grow it in the UK all year round. You couldn't survive on that. For one thing, because we need about 1.6 grams per kilogram of weight of protein. That's the equivalent. I mean, for someone like me, of my size, 13 stone, I need to have about 130 grams of carbohydrate every day just to maintain my body weight in terms of muscle, and to put a little bit more if I exercise. You can't find that in the in the vegetable kingdom without a lot of work, and
without a lot of supplementation.
A lot of supplementation, but 7 billion people.
Yeah. Vegetarianism was doable for me, but then, like, when I was looking at veganism, I was really struggling, and my vegan friends were always recommending supplements to me. I was finding that a real struggle. For me personally, it's just like it's a balance, and it's like, but the balance is always, swaying on the meat end. But I want some vegetables, but that's only if I'm in a state where my body can actually tolerate it, as you say. But primarily, it's like meat is the source, and I like fish, but there again, there's so much farm fish and poison fish, so it's getting access to the top quality meat, which is a difficult thing to do. But that's the path that works best for me. The difficulty I've had is the reason why I've looked at other diets is in my spiritual quest. I've had enlightened teachers that aren't very enlightened, or other teachers that are telling me to to open my third eye, to ascend, to get X, Y, and Z, the next step, that I need to stop eating animals because it's wrong, and I'm eating something, the energy's not right. I mustn't swear as well, all those kind of things. Or people telling other people what to do, and it's just like, it's my choice. Yeah, I've also met, very good spiritual teachers that say that, when an animal dies, that's its karmic kind of like resolution, and this is the time, and I'm fine with that. I'm fine with killing an animal. If you can kill an animal, I think you should be able to eat meat. I think that's the litmus test, really. I don't derive any pleasure from that, but I need to survive, and I know what my body needs.
But you're not supposed to enjoy killing.
No, but just to clarify that,
Yeah.
it's just like there isn't a pleasure to it, is it? There's a respect. There's a real respect for that animal, and I've heard these arguments, so I'm just trying to preempt it. And it's just like, do I respect an animal if I'm killing it? It's just like, I've got to eat. I'm being selfish. Well, I'm an apex predator.
What's an apex predator?
I'm just at the top of the chain, aren't I? And but with that comes responsibility, and that is about good animal husbandry, looking after the environment. I think the state of the farming world is appalling, what they're doing to the soil degradation, but the pollution from the methods that are used to deal with animal waste and what they're pumped full of is just wrong, and I don't want anything to do with that world. But there are better ethical alternatives, and that's where I choose to put my money.
So the ethical, spiritual dimension is an important aspect. As Joshua says, there is all manner of teachers out there telling you what you should eat or shouldn't eat. And the bottom line is always, what does your gut say? The problem is that, I've written articles to do with eating carnivore, and I spread them across numerous Facebook pages, all to do with spirituality, pretty much. And there's always a few. They love everything I write, except when I write about carnivore, when I write about eating for health. Then they say, oh, this has no place here. And yet, they're the ones who say, if you eat meat, it lowers your vibration. You won't be able to raise in consciousness. So that is a judgment made by, whether they get that information from, I'm not sure, but they make a judgment, and they're telling the rest of us how to be. And they're the gatekeepers, because they stopped me from putting that article when I tried to share information as to the various dimensions of being healthy. I don't see, this whole issue of spirituality is convoluted and confusing. People think that spirituality is the denial of the body, and nothing could be further from the truth. Because a healthy body is a prerequisite to experiencing all facets of life. If I want to be a monk, and I don't need to be very strong, and I want to be at prayers 3 or 4 hours a day, then I'll get away with having minimalist protein in my diet, and I may well live to a ripe old age. Why not? As long as the rest of my food is good. But there's not many people who can do that, and that in itself doesn't mean that you become more spiritual. I mean, for me, spiritual is being ordinary, just being in the world, just having relationships, experiencing all facets of my emotions. And that's got nothing to do with food, apart from the fact that when I eat the wrong foods, that interferes with my emotions. Because anything that clogs my insides, anything that clogs my internal organs, clogs my emotions, whether it's to do with grief, to do with fear, to do with anger, to do with empathy, sympathy, joy. My emotions are affected by the state of my internal organs. And it is possible, it is very, very possible to be a vegan and to be healthy, relatively speaking. But it does require keeping away from many foods which are high glycemic, they have a lot of sugar, keeping away from foods which are factory produced, and making sure you have vitamin B12, making sure that you have those seeds that contains the 9 essential amino acids, which are not usually found out there. The body cannot produce them, and they're not usually found out there unless you eat these certain foods that contain them, which are not there for the whole world. They can only be there for a few. So being a vegan is for the elites, for those who can afford to take such steps. This is not for the average person. The same applies to being a vegetarian. Unless you have eggs, unless you have fish, and even then you're going to struggle. So for the average person needs to eat at least some meat, at least 2 or 3 times a week, minimum. It contains a whole, not just the essential amino acids, but it contains a whole lot of other proteins which are essential for digestion. Cartilage, bone broth, to have cartilage, to have strong bones. You're not going to get that on a vegetable diet. We know that a lot of people, as they get old, they get, what's this word, osteoporosis. Osteoporosis is like, oh yeah, that's what happens when you get old. That's a nonsense. It's a belief. It's a label they've given it, but it's a nonsense. It's a lack of the essential foods that we need. We are relying so much on factory produced foods that we suffer. So spirituality has got nothing to do with whether we eat certain foods or not. I mean, if spirituality is to do with raising one's vibration, well, what's that mean? Does it mean that we can connect with something beyond the physical world? Well, hello. I mean, I have a direct connection to a 12th dimensional soul who instructs me, teaches me, shares information with me, helps me to help other people to heal themselves. And I am as blunt as a knife. I mean, I'm not exactly the most sensitive person in the world, Joshua is a lot more sensitive than I am, he's very empathetic. I'm not. And yet I have this connection to the beyond because I can open my heart. I can connect. When my heart is open, I can connect with beyond this realm, beyond this physical realm. And I get instructions, I get information, I get help with healing for myself, for my family, for my clients. And I eat meat all the time. I am 100% carnivore.
So could you not argue though that connection is because you're at your optimal, that you're not toxicated and suffering and poisoned, so you are open to that. If that's how it is for me, and I've experienced higher states of consciousness from the more the more healthy my temple is. But for me, it's fundamental about, spirituality is oneness and a connection with nature, and it's getting out in nature and being near a river. It's being kind and it's being loving. It's being in my heart. It's the more that I give, the more I seem to receive in that context. But it's when I've been eating the wrong things that I'm lethargic, that I'm tired, that my body is busy, dealing with that information. I'm having autoimmune responses, that I don't have any connection to my heart. I'm just constantly in here. That's the issue. Whereas, one of the probably about 3 years ago, when I was dealing with interference from other sources, I was told very specifically that I needed to increase my protein, that to fortify myself for my defenses, that I needed more protein in my life, and that actually, eating meat was the only way that I was really going to get there.
So I'm going to disagree a little bit with Joshua in that to be spiritual, from my perspective, from my experience, is to have that connection to the beyond is something that's available to everyone. It's not to do with food. What is required is, human beings, we have 3 brains. We've got the physical, we have an emotional, we have a mental brain. Those are the 3 lower brains. And they're important for the ego. The problem is that we are congested. Not just that when we're congested physically, because we're congested emotionally and because we're congested mentally. And so we begin with mental congestion, too many belief systems as to it should be this way or that way. And those belief systems limit our emotional expression. When we limit our emotional expression, we get a backlog and it builds up inside us. And the more of an emotional backlog we have inside us, the less capable we are of connecting with our hearts, because we're not in the world. We think we're in the world, but we're not. We're in our heads and we are reactive. Our emotional expression is one of reactivity in the world. So we're not here, we're not present, we're not connected. And then the more years that go by, so the physical then becomes blocked and disconnected as well. And this is why we are not rising. This is why we're not connecting to the beyond in a true sense of the word. Many people think they connect to the beyond, but it's all fantasy. But to truly connect with the beyond, we need to clear the backlog, physically, our emotions, and our mental belief systems. They get in the way. All of that gets in the way. If you truly aspire to spirituality, be ordinary, be mundane, connect with your emotions. Ask yourself, where do I get my ideas from? Who's told me that I have to be this? Who tells me that I have to eat this or eat that? What does my body ask of me? A pregnant woman is invariably in touch with what the body wants. Something cuts right across the bullshit, and their growing fetus has demands, and suddenly I fancy that, and they really want something desperately, because there's some sort of chemical, some sort of ingredient, some sort of nutrient. There's something. It always reminds me of my auntie in Spain. Every time she was pregnant, she wanted a watermelon, and she would fight anybody. It was her watermelon, and perhaps it was the potassium. There was something in there, and she needed that. When my second wife was pregnant, who'd been a vegetarian with me for 20 odd years, suddenly she had a desperate need for meat, and she was distraught in herself, because she believed about being a vegetarian, but suddenly she was craving meat.
But you know, some of this as well is the virtue signaling, isn't it? And like being part of the pack, and the latest thing is saving the world, and therefore you need to be a vegan. And so I'm joining in so I can wave the flag, and like I'm involved. I'm a good citizen. I'm doing the right thing. But you know, not really listening to their body and what they need, but in terms of fitting into what the latest thing is to be a solid citizen, that is it.
The problem is you can't listen to your body when you're in your head.
Yeah.
So if you're full of ideas, belief systems, indoctrinated ways of looking at the world, you're so disassociated from the world that you can't tell one thing from another.
Yeah.
You can't connect with the body.
Mm.
You know, the yogis, they've got this thing about, you know, you can feel your heart and you can sort of connect with all the different parts of your body. You know, that is the norm. It's not yogis. That's how I am right now. And I'm nothing special, I'm just ordinary. But all we need to do is be in our bodies. And anybody can be in their bodies. You just got to stop the head. You got to clear the emotions. And all of this is available to us. It's nothing special. This is how to be an ordinary human being. You know, being an ordinary human being is extraordinary in today's world. But we're aiming to be ordinary. Our whole body, our emotions, our feelings, our creativity, our intuition, all of that should be available to us all the time. But it isn't. Instead, we have this headspace about, I should be eating this, I should be a...
And you know, perhaps if I wasn't fed so many antibiotics when I was a child, when I just had a sore throat, perhaps if there was some exploration into what that was underlying, perhaps if I wasn't given antibiotics later on in my life and other remedies and you know, outcomes were reached, that I would be able to actually consume more vegetables. But I can't, and you know, the way in which my microbiome is, it means that, you know, meat is the best thing for me, and top quality meat only, and that's it. I can't deviate from that, because I get the instant feedback in the laboratory of my life that is my experience.
There was a documentary I saw many years back, very poignant. A lot of English women had gone to the Kalahari Desert to be with a Kalahari family and to learn from them about their diet. They were all obese. And the contrast was amazing. So there's this Kalahari family. There was the husband, the wife, and 2 or 3 children. And they were all very slim, very wiry. And as you watch them, your heart went out. This Kalahari woman was so empathetic, so truly, genuinely caring. The English women, like I said, obese, they were not very likable. Some of them were, but most of them were not very likable. Very critical, very dictatorial, and they were struggling to do the diet that they were. So they were explaining how this guy, he would run for 3 days because he knew that at this time of the year in a certain location there would be this big animal that would furrow underneath. So he would go there, he would run for 3 days, no food, no nothing, just run solid. He would get there, he would then find out the nest where it would be, he would then smoke it out, kill it, he would then take out the skin, and he would cook the skin, and he would then eat the skin. And then he would put the animal on his back, and he would now run all the way back to the family so they could have some meat. Meanwhile, the family would be waiting, and there were some trees where they knew where to go, and they would survive on a few thousand calories by finding a few seeds from the trees and finding a few roots, whilst they were waiting for the meat, which is what would nourish them. So the nuts and the roots They were just something to keep them going whilst they were waiting for their husband to bring them meat, without which they would die. You know, it's a story of heroism, really. It's a story of all manner of things.
This whole idea, though, can you imagine the Kalahari or other tribes being given fake meats? Here you go. Sorry, you've got to save the planet. Have your fake meats. I mean, you know, this it's a way in which we've kind of like made it more easy to transition to a plant-based diet, but the production that's involved in these fake meats and actually what's put into them, you know, if you're going to follow a plant-based diet, why would you want to be eating something that is a fake meat, that is a fake food, that has got, you know, low nutritional content, and it's a low vibration thing because it's you know, artificial? If you're going to eat that, you know, you want to be looking at kind of like whole grain foods and things that are growing naturally, opposed to supplementing with something fake that makes you feel that you're getting the satisfaction of eating something that is like an animal but isn't.
So it's a difficult topic, really. But one thing I can say with certitude, because I was a vegan, I then was a vegetarian for 20 years. I then became type 2 diabetic because I was relying on eating a lot of sugar. Bread, pasta. I was eating a little bit of chicken towards the end, but the surfeit of wheat as a staple is deadly to the human body. It was deadly for the Egyptians, and it's deadly for us humans. And if you go to a supermarket, out of 1,500 or so colorful different bits around the shop, it's all made out of about 3 or 4 ingredients, and most of those ingredients are wheat, fake soya, fake meats, cheap fat made from vegetable oils, which is really seed oils, salt, and then loads of calories and little chemicals to alter the taste to make it savory. And that isn't food. And that
it's addictive. It tastes
it's
nice.
Very addictive.
It makes us. There's the receptors in the brain. We want more of it, don't we? It's designed that way.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to be a vegetarian, then you need to understand something that you won't have understood, and that is that plants do not like to be eaten any more than animals like to be eaten, any more than we like to be eaten. Nothing on this earth likes to be eaten, but everything on this earth is eaten. Everything is eaten.
Loads of scientific studies about, you know, pulling up of carrots. They scream, you know. It's just like, it is the ending of a life. Is there a soul in a carrot? All of these aspects. The only way to do it is to be a fruitarian, isn't it? Which is even more extreme.
So nothing likes to be eaten, and everything has to be eaten. On this earth, everything needs to be eaten by something else. You can't avoid it. And so the plants don't like to be eaten, so they create oxalic acid, and they create linoleic acid, and they create lectins, because they don't want to be eaten. And there's lots of other pesticides, like, for example, people like to eat the seed of the coffee plant, and they get a nice high out of that, but what they're doing is they're actually drinking a poison created by the plant to stop the insects munching on it. It's protecting itself. And people think that because you've got a lovely cabbage out there in the garden and it's got a nice color, that it doesn't want, you know, you don't even give it 2 thoughts that it may have protective mechanisms to protect itself from insects from eating it. Everything has it, but not everything has it in the same profusion. So the cabbage family, for example, they have very low oxalate content. So they're fairly safe to eat because the poison level in it is very low. and a healthy human can process a certain amount of vegetables without damaging themselves. We can tolerate certain amounts of vegetables, except in this day and age, a lot of us have damaged our guts. Irritable bowel syndrome, how many people are there saying that? Colonic issues,
Microbiome
flatulence,
issues, the microbiome as well.
the microbiome. There are so many problems to do with digestion, and nobody's questioning them. We think they're normal. It is not normal to have problems with our digestive system. It is because we poison ourselves by eating the wrong foods. Now, vegetables per se spinach will damage you, but cabbage won't. Just to put that into perspective. Almonds will damage you, but macadamia nuts, you probably get away with a few. So different things contain different levels of toxins. Unfortunately, most of the people who do vegetarian go what they consider to be healthy food are toxic foods. Almonds, spinach, rhubarb, peanuts, cashew nuts, most of the nut family, primarily because the family in the Kalahari Desert, they would go to the tree and they would pick up the nuts, they would break them, they would eat them. They were fresh and they were eaten straight away. We go to a so-called health food shop, we buy them in bags, they've been out there for 6 months or so, they've been dehulled already, and then do we just have a few like we would if we were dehulling it ourselves? No. We eat them in front of the television by the handful. And they've got oils which have gone rancid, which are toxic to the human body. I mean, many a time I've picked up a walnut, oh, yucky, or an almond, oh, because they're so full of the poison.
But additionally, they're attracting molds as well. So these dried produce, well, in that drying process, they're getting other things onto them as well. So the contamination is immense.
Okay.
If we look at like the Scottish diet, back in the days, the foragers, they would have gone for the mushrooms, and when things were in season, they might have had some raspberries, but it's a very short period, and so it was that seasonal eating, but it wasn't about the focus or
They weren't vegetarian.
It's not conducive to be eating all of these vegetables in such large amounts. And I went through this whole thing in my 20s that the 5-a-day plan was like, I need to get more of these veg in. And I remember Popeye the Sailor Man with his spinach. I'm like, I'm going to get into this spinach. And I hated spinach, and my body's telling me, oh, what's this film that I'm getting? And I'm like, oh, wash it, put it in lemon juice. No, this is horrible. But I did it because it's going to make me stronger, just like Popeye. And I'm being told more spinach and peppers. I've never enjoyed peppers. They just keep giving me. I get the aftertaste, and I'm getting a reflux. And but persevere with this. I will, because this is what I need to be doing. And all of the things that I shouldn't be eating intuitively as a child, I had a complete dislike for. I forced myself because I felt that I should.
Of course, then they get us addicted to the sugar. Sugar, high glycemic foods, they didn't exist a few hundred years back. We have genetically created them. We've increased their sugar content. And we've then extracted the sugar from the plant. And now we can have the sugar by itself. So it's bad enough that you can have these foods which are very high in sugar. But now you go one step further, like they do with drugs, with the medicines. You go to the doctors, they give you a drug. Well, that drug comes from a plant. And that plant, at one time, people understood that if you had a certain ailment, you could take that plant and you would get relief at the time. It wasn't the answer, but you get the relief that you really needed. But nowadays, they give you the extracted chemicals, and you take that and you look at the packet. Well, you don't look at the packet because it's got hundreds of side effects. Because as soon as you extract something from nature, nature always contains opposites. So as soon as you extract it, it has no opposites. And it is a disaster to the human body. And sugars are a disaster to the human body.
I get it. Like, you know, people want those little fixes and those little, you know, stabs of happiness. And like you know, the policies of like reducing sugar, it says sugar free, and instead it's been swapped with a sweetener which has got, you know, just as many calories. You know, they're not all good for us. And yet, you know, everyone's now guzzling even more of this sugar free stuff, and it's just really not good for them, is it?
Well, you know, we had aspartame. They said, oh, it's okay because it's a natural product that is created in the body. And eventually the information began to come out that is actually deadly to the body. So what did they do? They changed the name. That was the answer. You know, as human beings, we've lost touch with being real. We've lost touch with nature. We have lost touch with the countryside. You know, we're city dwellers. We call ourselves civilized. But what it actually means is that we've lost our roots to the way the world functions. We've lost our connection to the fact that there is life and death, that everything dies, that everything needs to die. You need predators. If you are to have herbivores, you need predators to keep them in line. Otherwise, they will eat everything in sight and then they'll die anyway. So nature always contains a balance. You'll always have different insects that eat each other. And you know, if you grow vegetables, you will know this, that the aphids will have a bumper year, and then the ladybirds suddenly begin to multiply because now there is a profusion of aphids for them to munch on. And then the aphids disappear, and then the ladybirds also die because their food's gone. So there's always this sort of balancing act going on. Well, there's no one to stop us. There's no one to say no. So we've become our own worst enemies. I am not saying stop reproducing. I am not saying that we should cull the mankind. There's reasons why there's so many of us. However, the point remains that everything in nature feeds on something else. And it's just nature, it's just life. But we've become our own worst enemy because instead of killing the meats that we need to survive, we're now killing each other. So.
You know, I think another one that you may be aware of is the fact that you know, things that I think are foods are actually medicines. And you know, so if I've got an upset stomach or so I've got some cramps, have some peppermint and ginger. Or you know, people are saying, oh, inflammation, have some turmeric, but that might be inflammation for a joint or whatever. But actually, for me that's got problems with my intestines, turmeric is it's really bad for me. And actually, having peppermint tea probably isn't a good idea. It's not the right medicine for me. But everything gets pitched as being really healthy, and it's a plant, and therefore it's going to be doing me good, and you know, off you go, have plenty of that. But we need to remember that these foods are medicines.
That's a good point. That we've lost connection with the plant kingdom as powerful chemical factories that create ingredients that we can use for our own benefit in certain circumstances. But because of our modern world, where everything's about making money and how can I make money of other people, we latch on to fads, we create fads. And so herbs came into the market suddenly. Oh yes, herb teas all the time. People are having herb teas left, right and centre. And that is actually doing a disservice to the human body, because that's like taking a medicine that you don't need all the time. And any vegetables that you eat, they're all in the same situation. They're all chemical factories. Everything, you know, even a human being is a chemical factory. You know, we ourselves, we create lectins. Cows create lectins, but the lectins of the cow, for whatever reason, there is no reaction in the human body. But for some of us, and that includes me, because I've had leaky gut syndrome, and I used to eat a lot of lamb, and the lamb lectin got into my bloodstream, and my body now interprets me eating lamb as though it's something bad, and my body now attacks me if I eat lamb. The same thing if I eat fish, certain fishes. So we call that being, what's the word, allergic.
Mm-hmm.
But it's an internal reaction to eating these other animals, fish, plants. They all have lectins. If they get inside your blood system, your body reacts to that. That is how they protect themselves. So one of the means by which other plants protect themselves. They like to kill whoever is killing them. It may be a long process, but it's part of the makeup of everything in life. Everything has a means of identifying itself and protecting itself from predators. And human beings are predators, and we have a niche. And our niche is really red meats. The reason why I've become allergic to lamb and chicken is because of eating too many seeds, too many plants, which damaged me. Well, and also aluminium, but that's another story. But the point is, once I had damage in the guts, then these lectins got through my system, and I no longer had a defense for them, and now my immune system became compromised. All plants have this, and if we don't eat healthily, and that means limiting the amount of vegetables that we consume, then we make ourselves susceptible to the poisons which are inherent in all plant life and other forms of life. Very difficult to comprehend that, because you go to the supermarket and you see all these wonderful fruits and all these vegetables galore. And why would you question? What is it we hear people say, oh, nature provides for us.
Mm-hmm.
Nature likes to grow these fruits for us so that we can be more enlightened or whatever. No, nature doesn't create anything for us. We found the niche in nature to survive. And we now, and this is now, it didn't used to be like this, but now in the last 150 years, we now think that we are herbivores, in spite of the proof that our stomach and our digestive system is geared towards carnivore. We are geared towards the breaking down of proteins and the breaking down of fats. That's what we're geared for. We're no longer geared towards the breakdown of the vegetables, which is why we have so many irritable bowel syndromes, colics, or whatever you call them, all these sort of twisted guts. There is so much damage in people's intestines. When I was a vegetarian, I used to say to my wife, oh look, I've just had a tiny little spoonful of sugar. And I would bloat up with air. The bacteria inside of me was having a field day, creating all this wind, which wasn't going anywhere. My intestines were growing. I could sort of see them sticking out of the sides because there's so much wind in there and so much roughage, which wasn't being digested. It was just going straight through.
You need some peppermint tea and turmeric golden milk.
Yeah. Anyway, it's a bit of a rumble, this one. We've gone all over the place. No structure. We've lost the structure. Still, I hope that you got something out of listening to us, even if it's a bit confusing. I have lots of articles on my website, and there's lots of other podcasts as well on the subject. Any last words?
No, I covered it all, I feel.
Well, if you enjoyed listening to us, please subscribe, click on the like button, it'd be lovely. Many thanks, and till next time. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.